So this whole Liz Cheney getting thrown out of her chair and Republican Civil War thing, it's striking me as a little propaganda-ish. I was able to talk to Josh Holland about how it actually is propaganda, why it's propaganda, what's happening in the Republican Party, and what's happening to journalists. And we did that all in 15 minutes. Take a watch. So I was listening to your podcast, which is how I found Tim Pool's advertisement underneath you. And you were talking about how this whole BS about the Republican Civil War is a non-thing. Because the Nutters already won, yes?
Yeah, I mean, Sherman's march is complete. The Civil War is over, right? Liz Cheney is basically very far right royalty. She was not a mushy centrist. There's nothing ideologically. There's no ideological gap. She between her and the Trumpists, the MAGA bunch, other than possibly on Trump's occasional idiosyncratic policies on trade or whatnot. But she's a very, very staunch right-wing conservative, and she's been completely hounded out of the party. And they all have. So, I mean, the fealty to Trump is what it's all about. And there was a poll that just came out over the weekend. So CBS did a poll of only Republican voters, self-identified Republicans, I should say. And, a lot of them, it wasn't a majority opinion, but first of all, overwhelmingly, they approved of Liz Cheney being stripped of her leadership. But also, I think it was 35% or something said it was proper to punish people for not being loyal to Trump. So
that is,
I mean, that's cultish, they're very explicit. It was almost, you wondered why they would not understand how they're supposed to answer that question. Like, we're punishing people for being disloyal to the former president.
So Republican voters are really falling in line with their insane leaders. It's not just the leadership who has fallen in lockstep.
Yeah, what's happening is that you're seeing the people who remain strong Republican voters are completely in lockstep with their leadership and absolutely adhered to Trump. The thing with partisanship that I think is important to understand is that, a lot of people are not very reliably wedded to one party or another. So despite all of the polarization that we see, there are people who are Republicans, are Democrats, or identify as independents who lean Republican or lean Democrat, who are not committed to the parties themselves. Republican identification has fallen to I think a 12-year low, according to Gallup. So there is certainly, we talk about a Republican Civil War. No, there's not a Republican Civil War. There is a rift with some less attached Republican leaners and the Republicans. So people who were not necessarily loyalists, partisan loyalists, have been turned off by Trump's ham-fisted attempt to pull off a coup d'etat and other things, right? His bombastic style, his demagoguery, his bigotry, all of that. The whole Trump experience, if you will. And so you see that there is a fair share, and it's not huge, but it was fairly significant numbers of people who have said, okay, I'm not a Republican anymore. And those people are kind of up for grabs, I think, to a point that, to a degree that is more than usual. And we'll see how all this plays out as we go into 2022, because, these off-term, everybody expects Republicans to do very well in the midterms, but if they lose a few percentage points, you don't have to have huge swings to have fairly consequential impacts in low turnout elections. If you have,
especially if they're doing all kinds of voter suppression across the country.
Yeah. Well, there's the voter suppression, and then there's people being turned off by the party, and these are countervailing, forces that are going to shape what 2022 looks like. I think it's very much up for grabs, and a lot of it depends on whether Democrats can get it together to persuade Joe Manchin to pass election reforms. I mean, this is a huge piece
Yeah.
of the puzzle. Yeah.
You know, I'm really interested in the media narrative around the whole Liz Cheney thing. You know, MSNBC has its viewers, you know, I think it's trading on this terror of Trump, terror of Trump's followers, terror of a Trump return, of wannabe Trumps like Ted Cruz or Matt Gaetz or Ron DeSantis.
Right.
You know, I'm just not sure exactly how this Liz Cheney thing seems to be playing into this propaganda of that goes against what you're saying, which is, you know, oh, the whole of the Republican Party is still one giant mass, and they're all leaning toward Trump, as opposed to what you're saying, which is there's a large percentage of people who are kind of on the fence there anyway, and they're not necessarily going whole hog Trump down, but there are enough to make it.
Well, we'll
it
see.
scary.
I don't think that it's a huge number. I mean, I don't think it's a huge number. I think that
Are falling off.
Like, I mean, Republican the share of people who identify as Republicans, according to Gallup, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it declined by about 4 or 5 percentage points. So that's not a huge number. That's not, you know, giant numbers of Republicans headed for the exits by any means. And again, I think that both of these things can be true in a large degree, because the party is, you know, increasing. The Republican Party is definitely almost all leaning towards Trump, and they are punishing the small number of apostates up and down, you know, even at the local level. They are gunning for secretaries of state and Republican election officials that they feel did not support Trump's crackpot coup d'etat. And at the same time, you know, this is a very, very polarized, divided country. And if you alienate the right, you know, the right mix of people in the right suburbs, for example, you can really set yourself back in a midterm contest, even if your party is coalesced around Trumpism. You see what I'm saying? So, like, both of those things can be true.
I feel like that was a great joke on Saturday Night Live. Michael Che made a great joke about how he said, I never thought I'd feel bad for Liz Cheney. And I
didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that sums up how most of us feel. I mean, these people, they made what's happening possible by their participation in a system. It's not like this whole Trump thing just came out of nowhere, as you've been talking about. It's been coming for decades.
If I could just, I want to add something to that. So, first of all, I have noticed nobody claiming that Liz Cheney is a hero. Just everybody saying Liz Cheney is no hero. There's like there's a chorus of that, and it's absolutely true. And a lot of people say, oh, you know, because of her father, support for the Iraq War, etc. And I just want to point out how awful Liz Cheney is in her own right, distinct from Dick Cheney. She has been a driving force of the institutional Islamophobic movement on the right, the far right. She has demonized immigrants, and she has supported the big lie, the original big lie, that there is widespread voter fraud and they need to do voter ID and stuff like that. That's the big lie that's been around since long before Trump. My goodness. They used this for decades. So Liz Cheney is absolutely awful. She's awful in her own right, again, distinct from Dick Cheney. And at the same time, I don't have a problem acknowledging that she is she's fighting the good fight finally on this narrow area of like accepting democratic outcomes, because that is a little different. You know, there's a difference between trying to pass voter ID laws and trying to intimidate people from voting, and then when the votes are cast and counted, saying we're not going to accept this. That is a difference, and I give her credit for not going all the way, you know. But she is she's a wingnut. I mean, she's a destructive wingnut. She's, you know, been a very strong opponent of LGBTQ rights, et cetera, up and down. She, you know, the environment, any issue that you care about, she's been on the wrong side of.
Josh, I just still can't put my head around who this whole "there's a war in the Republican Party" serves. who does this serve? I mean, the Republican Party itself has been the party.
It serves the political press. It serves everybody loves intra-party fights. The media love it. Readers love it. People click on it. People listen to it. It serves the interests of the political press, just like Democrats in disarray have long been a staple for Politico and The Hill. They love that. They absolutely love that. It serves their interests. And this is a fairly, I mean, I worry about getting in trouble for saying this, but in relative terms, this is a somewhat boring period in American politics, in that, we have a boring president, and that's something that a lot of us
doing nice things for people
enjoy, right? Like he's passing things that are like popular even among Republicans and independents. You gotta have something sexy, and intra-party civil war is always a sexy political topic.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
the
cynical but true.
Not that the Democrats are not like corporates sold out also, but the Republican Party has, maybe more so than the Democrats, been the party of deregulation, very corporate friendly, environmental.
Well, but Ted Cruz isn't taking your vote dollars anymore, though.
Yeah,
Ted Cruz is done. Done with the PAC dollars.
Like, how is the Trump era and Trumpism, how does it serve the corporate interest? It seems like, most large corporations didn't really say anything. They supported Trump until he got a little too crazy, and then they jumped ship. But this is still happening over there on the right.
Well, I mean, those tax cuts were certainly served the corporate agenda. I mean, he was
my taxes. I didn't get any tax cuts.
Yeah, well, you're not a giant corporation, Julianna.
Trying.
You're not a giant corporation. You got to get $1 billion before you.
I refuse to take advantage of my one employee, me. Yes.
It was always a question to me. I remember when we used to hear all the time that corporations really valued continuity and predictability, and this was something that was a premium for them, just to have a predictable, and with Trump, he was so erratic, and he would impose trade policies because he woke up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever. And yet they tolerated it. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't really know what the thing is. I think we probably make a mistake when we see corporate America as monolithic. There is a lot of variation in corporate governorship, corporate leadership. There's a lot of commonality, but a lot of diversity as well. Many companies said, we're going to put our foot down when it comes to rejecting or trying to overturn the results of the election. Companies spoke out about the raft of voter suppression laws that were passed after the election. Republicans have threatened them with various forms of retaliation. How deep that goes, I don't know. I had Judd Legum on the podcast last week. He was talking about how corporate PACs are trying to get back into donating to the 100+ Republicans who voted to overturn the results of the 2020 election. And they're doing it gradually. Some of them have continued to suspend donations to those politicians. Others are kind of trying to get back in and coming up with communication strategies to justify that. They clearly felt rebuked. I mean, one thing that I think you can always tell the degree of derp coming out of the right-wing media is a reflection of how threatened they find things. And the corporate pushback against the insurgency was certainly something that got a lot of attention from Republicans and the right-wing press. And I think that was something that rattled them. And I'm not sure it's enough to deter their behavior, though.
When I was looking for what to discuss today, I was like, let's discuss policy. And I looked through the rest of the news, and all I found was mostly bullshit reported. I noticed that you said in your one of your recent podcasts, which is, by the way, We've Got Issues. Definitely find it wherever you find good podcasts because it's great. You've got more than 200 episodes people can dig into. But in one of your more recent ones, you said that you just were kind of getting burnt out because these Republicans are, you used to like take a joy. Let me know if I'm getting this right, but there
No,
used to
you're
be
getting it right.
that you were like actually doing something useful when you were debunking right-wing talking points because people were taking part of the political process, and those right-wing points needed to be debated. But now it's just point after point after point after point, and they know it's bull. It's not just spin, it's complete bull, and you've gotten burnt out. Do you think that have you seen that other writers
Yes, I
getting
have.
burnt out as well?
I absolutely have, and I mean it gets wrapped up in COVID. A lot of people who covered this pandemic, dealing with the flood of information, just this relentless flood of nonsense about COVID. Maybe I shouldn't share this anecdote. I was at a diner the other day. I'm fully vaxxed. One of the things that I missed was going to the diner. That was one of my big treats. And this guy at the diner was talking about how people were being brainwashed by the government on COVID, which wasn't a threat. And I actually kind of lost it on him. And it was a public, we were at the counter, and I raised my voice. I definitely I lost my cool, right? Like I lost my cool. And I've been, there's a lot of people who are burned down. But that's part of propaganda. That's part of the purpose. That's what it does. It's intended to exhaust people. It is intended to exhaust people. That is part of why it works. So we are dealing with a sprawling propaganda network on the right. It's very well developed. It is everywhere. It's in social media. It's on regular media. It's very, very tiring to keep up with. And I've been doing this for 20 years now, so I am struggling with burnout.
Well, we wish you the best. Hopefully, this actually
Thank
makes
you.
you feel better, because we're feeling burnt out. By we, I mean me.
We're all feeling it. We're all feeling it.
We are
Yeah.
all me feeling it.
I need to go scuba diving. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
Scuba diving. Yeah.
And then pick up
recharge the batteries. Yeah, I need to do that.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. The podcast We've Got Issues is great. What's coming up this week?
This week we are speaking with a mayor who has actually defunded his police. Set up a non-police responders. And we're also going to talk to a Wall Street Journal reporter who did a very interesting story last week about this poor guy, the Syrian guy, who got stuck on a ship because the owners kind of abandoned it in Egypt in the Suez Canal, and he couldn't get off, and he was stuck there for years, kind of imprisoned on the ship. Fascinating story. Yeah. Very weird. So
how did he eat? Fishing? Amazing.
So he had food stores, and then he would like jump ship, and then the police would round him up and put him back on the ship. It's a crazy story. And apparently
I can't wait to hear it.
And here's the thing, there's thousands of people like this around the world at any given time in the shipping industry. They get like stranded because of these legal disputes, and shipping companies are shady and often will end up like with bills that they don't pay, and then authorities will confiscate a ship, and there has to be somebody like manning the systems, and they end up getting stranded. It's really a wild story.
That is wild. Okay, yeah. I can't wait to hear it. Thanks for coming on the show, Josh. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Julianna. I appreciate that.
You're watching ActTV.